Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Think of It This Way. Thank you so much for joining me. And on this episode, I will have with me none other than my good friend, Philip Durocher, who is an equity and credit research analyst. So, Phil, thank you for being here.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me on board.
Yeah. So, Phil, as we have done in all previous one episode of this podcast, I like to start by simply having you tell us about your origin story. I think it's always fascinating to hear people describe how they got to where they are today in terms of their career. I did it myself in the Facebook group to kick things off. And I know it's a pretty interesting tale because there was quite some twists and turns, being that I was there for a piece of that. So Phil, take it away. How did you become? What was the road you took to become an equity and credit research analyst?
Well, so when I was in my late teens, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life. So back then, everything IT was hot, and I was concerned about finding myself a job. So that's where we found each other at Concordia University, studying computer engineering. And so we did 4 years of that, and I did find a job right away afterwards, probably a month after school. After I looked for a job, I found one. The problem is that even though I had a job and I was making money, I wasn't very happy. I didn't think the job was fulfilling for me. So, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I wasn't going to do 35 years of a job that I wasn't interested in. I was making lots of money and I didn't even know what to do with it because I wasn't married and buy a house. But my father was making lots of money on the stock market. So I decided to invest it. And that's where I found my true passion, which was investing in the stock market. And so I bought my first company, first stock, if you will, and then it just grew from there. And then I found myself spending my time at my job in computer engineering, staring at the stock market screens on my computer. So I was telling myself, well, if I'm going to be doing this all day, why don't I just make it a career? And that's when I decided to leave my job and do an MBA and to study the field that I was actually interested in. And then, although I graduated right after 9/11, it did take me 2 years, but I finally found a job in Toronto in the equity market research capacity. And, I branched off to credit research, which is very similar. And here I am today.
Cool, cool. So, what I'm picking up from that is that as cliche as it might sound to some, both of us, we met there as you mentioned, and both of us broke off from there because of a lack of passion. It's like me. It was a similar story for me. Now, it wasn't even a good friend of mine. It was like just a friend of the family who happened to be teaching, saying, "Oh, go to computers. They're the wave of the future." Like, okay. So I went there by the strength of my math stuff, and yeah, it ended up it was okay, but like you, I'm like, yeah, staring at circuits and code and so forth. I found stuff that was mildly interesting some of the time, but there was a piece of the equation that was missing for me, that was lacking. So when I got let go, when the tech bubble burst, I did not go back like I intended to study some more. I ended up in educational technology. So um, here I'm looking. I have my next question here. Given that I'm trying to interact with this, get a better grasp of this role of yours, I try to do a little bit of research on it. Given that my financial expertise is nowhere near yours, I have very conventional means of putting away money and everything. I thought I'd grab a few definitions there from the internet, and I have here as a key takeaway that equity research analysts research public companies and come up with recommendations for investors about whether to buy, sell, or continue holding certain stock. Whereas a credit research analyst is responsible for gathering information about applicants seeking a loan or a line of credit, helping the lender determine how creditworthy the applicant is. So does that basically sum it up if you were to?
No. So yeah, you're right about the equity research component.
Yeah.
So after I invested in my first company, for instance,
Yeah.
it was just when you're a neophyte and you're first investing in the stock market, you buy a company, all you stare at is the share price. But after a while, you start asking questions. Well, what is driving the share price? Like, why is the share price going up or down or not moving? And so you kind of tend to look at the financial statements and the balance sheet and the business model and whether the business is growing. Now, you're right about the credit research component with regards to, say, a lot of people in that business. But when I did credit research, it was kind of very similar to equity research. And my client was the bank itself. So the bank had corporate loans. It was loaning to companies in billion-dollar capacities with just think of it as a credit line. But instead of a personal credit line for yourself, it's a billion-dollar corporate line for like an oil and gas company.
Mhm.
And it's a syndicated loan, which means our bank is with partners 19 other banks, and we're all lending kind of $50 million components to it. So if that loan goes awry, the bank has a huge write-off. So I was doing the same equity research capacity in my credit research job. And so that's why I didn't want to just say equity research, because I do have significant levels of experience doing credit research.
Yeah.
But you're right; it's a good point that it's very easy to take the definition of credit research and misapply it for my work experience.
All right. Cool. So that said, if I were to, I try to actually come in as an instructional designer and say, and if I had a project about this, and I needed to go to the very top, like I just tried with these definitions. I always have to go in with a beginner's mind, and yeah, start off with like these very small statements, and not only small statements that you expanded on, but also things that I can carry over from other concepts, like having a mental model that someone else can relate to, just applied here in this new context. So one thing I was thinking of as I was preparing for this, as we talked a little bit in our little prep meeting yesterday, was like, okay, if I were to simplify this even more, to someone that was really a newcomer like me, as we prepared for this, when it seemed, is it can you tell me if I'm anywhere near correct or on the right track when I interpreted last night that equity and credit research almost two sides of the same of a coin, or a yin and yang relationship? Because I found that with equity research, you're trying to uncover the future, and credit research, you're trying to uncover the past, both in a financial context. Would you say that, or not?
No, because what we're concerned about all the time, especially the nature of the job, is to see what's going to happen next, right? So if you buy shares, obviously you're not too concerned about the past as much as you want to know what's going to happen in the future, because people buy shares, want to see the share price go up.
Right.
In regards to my role in credit research, the stakeholders of the bank want to know if the loan was going to go keep going well, because there's not much upside, right? Like you make a loan, you pretty much make that interest rate as long as the loan gets repaid.
Mm-hmm.
So basically that's the question. Do we have to be concerned about that dynamic?
Right.
And if we have to be concerned, what are we going to do about it? So you're right. I mean, a lot of this, like the balance sheets, are all in the past. The financial statements are all in the past. But you mentioned overlap, and one thing I'd like to mention: the best analysts in my role are not the ones who look at the past, fill up an Excel spreadsheet, crunch the numbers, come up with a target price, and say, "Oh well, target price is $15, the share price is $10, therefore it's a buy." The best analysts I've noticed are more like they're more investigative sleuths. They're more like Sherlock Holmes.
Hmm.
And so they're continuously using natural curiosity and trying to poke holes in their story, always challenging their notions, keeping an open mind. Mind you, they will rebuttal you no matter what. And they're constantly putting their conviction to the acid test, if you will. So because in engineering, we're pretty much taught to think linearly, fill out our models, to think mathematically. the whole logical deduction, human heuristic, behavioral component is not there. Whereas in the stock market, as you can tell, throughout history, a lot of the behavioral patterns are far more human than they are mathematical.
Yeah.
Although there's theoretically, one could be the other. But from when I first started my career in equity research, I was pretty much amazed by my boss who, I thought we had this done. I thought we had our conviction set. I thought we crunched the numbers. Like, what more do you want? But he never quit. He always, looked at different angles and fielded questions from different angles and didn't just dismiss them. He digested them and actually, sorry, my computer shut off, and entertained them. And if he rebutted them, he had all his facts straight.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So you beat me to the punch. Great. You already checked it off. I was going to ask how much of how much computer engineering served you. If there, what level of analysis or parallelism did you find? But you touched upon it that a bit. That there was still very like you described it as two different worlds. I also know.
Well, as you know, George,
Yeah.
I remember you swearing under your breath about all the math classes we were taking and the
Right.
green theories and the Stokes theories, and
Yeah.
maybe I didn't use those theories in my future capacity, but definitely having your brain chiseled on the backbone of math certainly helped in this new capacity.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That is a common foundation, and like I've said before, um, for me, it's helped in instructional design and saying, okay, what can I use in the past to bring me forward? And if anything, computer engineering wasn't a total write-off. It was a foundation to give me a twist to approach instructional design with. Because when I showed up there, there were like teachers and artists and all sorts of a big eclectic bag of people with different bachelor's degrees. So I felt very happy after getting through a rough transition of how do I bring this to, how do I bring my past to the present and then make it an asset? I managed to find a way. So sounds like you did as well. I picked off a few terms here that are key to me as an instructional designer. You talked about curiosity, story. Stories are big in instructional design. A lot of times you tell a story throughout. You could use a character to tell a story as you're doing an e-learning. Challenges, having conviction. So you have a lot of emotional engagement. And like I said before, I tried to make a lot of parallels in my e-learning. And I was wondering, given that I know you pretty well, this is like just a fun question that taps into your personality and the mechanics or the engineering of your personality and your passion. When I was thinking about it, and you in preparing this podcast, I'm thinking, I wonder if it's the same drive you have for your hobbies when you're like, picking up hockey magazines to scout for the up and coming rookies. Where is it that same thrill of wanting to know what's next and trying to be the prognosticator or like the wise man, the draft guy that can see the future and knows where to invest his money or his emotion or his attention or his draft pick in a hockey pool? Does it all ball up into the same neighborhood for you? Like, do you think that it's the same thing that drives you in both work and hobby?
I think you're onto something there, George. I think personality-wise, the level of curiosity I have, you ask yourself, why am I like this?
Yeah.
But it's pretty much the same. Like when I watch the NFL draft and I say, oh, that player is going to be great, and oh, that team made a mistake on this player. To me, it's the same thing as when I look at certain share prices when they go sky high, and I'm like, there's nothing to support this. Why are people getting excited over this one company when they should just be dropping it? And in the level of analysis I do in terms of with my football magazines or my hockey magazines, and then the level of passion reading it, just to give you an insight into me when I'm doing this, it doesn't feel like work. It's like, as you said, it's a hobby. I'm being entertained. I find intrinsic satisfaction. And especially the part where, say, if I'm wrong, like if I really was down on a player and that player proved me wrong, or same thing with the share price, right? And the share price doubles after I say, well, this will never last. And then I learned something about myself, like where did I go wrong? What do I have to correct going forward? So it's as you learn in engineering, it's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
Where you continuously try to calibrate your judgment and improve upon it.
That's pretty cool. Indeed, yeah, because in the end, you can spend as much time, someone obsessing over baseball statistics could have the same um, ability to do it in the stock market if they were just shown how similar it is and how and be sold on the benefits of it and so on. So that's pretty cool. Now, formally, as you went on to study for your career, two things. First off, how did they present things when you did your master's, and did you accept that way, or like did you find it effective, or did you just do the Phil thing that I know and just bury yourself in a cubicle and go hardcore with your own style? So and to expand and compare with my field in instructional design, for instance, when you were taught and you did your master's, your MBA, I think, right? Do they use, for instance, a lot of, is it more theory based, or do they try to throw in case studies and scenarios, which we do a lot of times in instructional design, to like give you an authentic feeling of what it's going to be like to once you finish your degree? Like how do they mix it up, and how did you like it, and what did you do on top of it?
Well, I didn't have too many problems the way you described me in my MBA, although I can describe a few incidents. The first year of the MBA, it was pretty much they decide for you what you're going to take. So I just joined the MBA because I wanted to learn about the stock market, but they inputted organizational behavior, for instance, of the class, or marketing. There was a lot of marketing classes that I really felt like I wasn't the nerd in the class with regards to those. I was really the laggard. And I was really saying, oh, when will this, it's pretty funny too, because when the marketing people were taking my finance classes, they were saying, when is this going to be over? And I was feeling the same way when I was taking their marketing classes.
Yeah.
One thing, I had a great career and placement lady. She said you had to do your CFA, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm already doing my MBA. Like, what more do you need? But thankfully, I listened to her, and I did my CFA at the same time as my MBA because they reinforced one another, and it spared me a lot of time later on and grief too. So that was great. Now my second year, it was all me. And I just loaded up on valuations, capital markets, corporate finance, everything. And then I aced every single class because that was being me. But the problem was that when I left my MBA to go do the job, that's when I was emotionally, psychologically, and maybe intellectually unprepared. Because as I said, my boss wasn't just a number cruncher, pop up like the target price, compare it to the current price and see if it's a buy, sell, or hold. It's more like, you see these 3-letter acronyms that are scrolling on the screen, Phil? I want you to attribute those to tangible reality. And I want you to do that in mathematical form. So take an abstract and make it linear. And I want you to present it to me in convincing manner that showcases it. And then I want you to convey that, as you said, the story, right? Because, for instance, I get lost in court cases. For instance, you know, these lawyers, they spend 6 months, they study a court case, and then I come along and a court case decision has been rendered, and I'm like reading through 6, 7 paragraphs, and after 6, 7 paragraphs, I'm lost. I haven't covered this case for 6 months. I'm trying to figure out if the court case decision was right or wrong, but I'm lost in the story. Now, a simple little effective story said by either the lawyer for the plaintiff and the lawyer for the other side could pretty much, set my mind straight. So once I crunched all the numbers and I did my investigative research and I have like my convictions that I can back them up with like tangible math, I then have to convey that story. I have to explain and say to you, George, why you should buy this company and answer all your questions in a way that's concise, that's not going to bore you to death.
Yeah.
And that you can feel comfortable investing in the company after I explain it to you. So all these elements are very important. You miss out on doing your research properly, you make a bad call. You do your investigative, you make the right math call, but the company went in the wrong direction because you didn't do your organizational behavior research. And then once you do all that, you're boring in your delivery. No one wants to listen to you. What's the point?
That's interesting, Phil. I didn't realize how closely our jobs can actually come together, because when you're describing writing the report, not only has to be very thorough and you take a whole bunch of abstract information and then turn it from the abstract into the linear and in an entertaining manner. That's practically what we have to do as instructional designers. Like, here's a bunch of info, and our job is to make it look palatable, enjoyable, because otherwise what we have to fight as instructional designers is the old paradigm of training of just being info dump or even info vomit, if you will. It's like, blah. Like, yeah, okay, great. What am I supposed to do with this? It's just totally indigestible. So it's like, okay, hold on, let me see how this works. I end up like taking notebooks and making drawing pads and diagrams and so forth. And okay, this should go here, this should go here, this should go here, and then like I'm doing here, presenting examples of other models from other things people are familiar with. Like I use the sports one here, all that to like make a bridge to something new to them that is comprehensive, that is enjoyable, that is effective. So that's cool. See, this is the whole theme of the podcast. How like what seem to be totally different fields can boil down to a lot of the same things. So that's very cool. Okay, so moving right along here. So in your career, like I've known, you ascended, which didn't surprise me, to a role where you had to, you had others. You were like you've been a director. You've had others beneath you to report to and all that. So going from student to teacher in this context, how did you approach imparting the knowledge to others? Oh, pardon me. Okay. There we go. Pardon me. So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So in terms of, I've never had delusions of grandeur from the standpoint that I want to lead others.
Okay.
I was very flattered and happy I got promoted, and especially because it was in a field where I felt like I knew what I was doing. I was in control. I had been doing this for a long time. So what I expected of my team members was exactly what I was producing. So effectively, a level of teaching was simply imparting my knowledge upon them, and I had to learn, right? Obviously, just because technically you know what you're talking about doesn't mean that they have, or your team members have, the same incentives, exactly, or the same drive or the same interest in what you're doing. They might have chosen these fields the same way, and in many ways, I felt sympathy and commiserated with them because, I did my I did my computer engineering degree because I thought that was the thing to do. I remember being on the computer shop floor, being explained something, saying to myself, "Oh, when is this guy gonna just stop talking?" And seeing the look on the instructor's face, going like, "Why is this person not responding?" Right? And so you flash forward 10, 15 years, and then the roles are reversed. And so I try to change it up a bit, but my major sticking points were: this is the job, this is your expectations. If you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them. And please, if you have any confusion at all, just come see me, and I'll instruct and I'll walk you through it, or we'll work it out. In terms of the motivational factors, well, that was a completely different story. It was something I had to learn, right? Like, you have to go, each person's different. How do you make, person A, oh yeah, person A, he doesn't respond to strict mannerism. He likes the cool guy. Let's go down for a coffee. Let's talk about it. Person B doesn't like these long-winded answers. Okay, well, just keep it short, and then keep it short again, and then walk your way to the end zone. And then you say, well, next time, how about we cut the questions in half because you figure things out. And that was another key point. Like, my boss always told me, take it as far as you can before you come see me with a question.
Okay.
And so I kept that in the back of my mind. Before you come see me a question, take it as far as you can. In fact, I do that with my kids. I think, that's the problem. As a kid, you come see your parents and you say, I got a question. And because you met an obstacle, you didn't even give it a try. And you're like, Dad, it didn't work. The TV didn't turn on. Dad, help me out. And so I tell my kids, take it as far as you can. Did you check to see if the power is on? Did you, flick the TV? Did you push the button, the remote control? Maybe the batteries on the remote control aren't working. Maybe you should go to the back of the TV and try to turn it on manually that way. And they're like, oh, right. And as an adult, you kind of hope that these things were weeded out, but in many cases they're not.
No, that is really true. So that's cool. I picked up on a few things I can relate to when you're saying, oh, some people want to be short and to the point. Other people want more elaboration. We have in the past designed, for instance, instruction e-learning for doctors or whatnot, and because the role is so important, they need to be communicated with so effectively that we designed the same piece of content in 4 different ways for like 4 different color-based personality styles. So the red guy, just like, give me the bottom line. I don't have time for this boom, like keystrokes, and the blue one wants the data, and the green one wants the fuzzy benefits, like, how's it going to help my people, person-centered. And the yellow one wants to explore what this can mean for the future. So it really speaks to me in terms of you have to do like an on the spot needs analysis and know your avatar, know your target audience to say, okay, in what manner am I going to get my data or my training through them in the best way possible? And yeah, when you say give it a try, take it as far as you can. Indeed, a lot of things that we're fighting, the old paradigm in training is like, yeah, again, bleh, info vomit, info dump. And I just sat through a webinar yesterday where, like we already knew, like the new generation already knows, don't just throw a bunch of information at people. That's if you do it well, that's one thing, and there's tricks for that. But stop, make them pause, and make them apply something. Otherwise, it's going to go in one ear, out the next. The crystallization and the development of the skill happens with actual application, and let them toil and let them wrestle with it and struggle with it, whatever that makes it. That's part of the process, So as long as there's an allowance for that, if you don't need instant results right away, and whatever, they're not under pressure, they're on the farm team and they're allowed to slowly develop, then it's all good, right?
I totally agree. You can't just pander to your team and just babysit everything they need to do. You're trying to bridge a gap. You're not trying to build a pier here.
Yeah, very good. One thing that I'm wondering, speaking of that same webinar from yesterday, the guru, if you will, or one of the leaders of my industry, talked about how we're stuck in a position sometimes, and we have to be very careful on how we position ourselves, not to just say, hey, yeah, I'm an e-learning, I'm an instructional designer, I'm an e-learning developer, and I create great e-learning, I create engaging e-learning and all that. The thing is, sometimes in our field, you have some big manager that says, oh man, there's like, we're missing skills in these areas of whatever. Like, let's say if I were to, auditing, or if I were to try to relate it to auditing and analysis and whatever, and just think of like a 10 skills of yours. It's like, I gotta solve this. And they would come to me, someone like me, and say, oh, I want to have a 3-hour e-learning that covers these 10 hours, these 10 skills, so that, and they think that it's like a shot in the arm, boom, and all of a sudden, hey, there's going to be instant enlightenment, and all their problems will be solved. When, of course, as you can relate to based on what you just said, it won't work that way necessarily at all. And we have to be very delicate and try to change their minds and go more into exploration and fragilize, as one of our mentors says, their beliefs about what is possible. And I say all this just to ask you. I was wondering, as I was thinking of this last night, have you ever faced challenges where you're doing your research and you're reporting to someone, your stakeholders, however direct or indirect, and however which way you get a pushback from you saying, you know, we really want to invest in whatever, like you were saying yesterday, oh, biodiversity. No, we think that's the way to go. And your research says, no, that's not the way to go. We should go, I don't know, precious, but I'm just talking off the top of my head. Do you ever get in situations where you have to get your pushed back and you have to like tiptoe and gingerly manage something because people are expecting one direction from your research or your counsel, and they're emotionally attached to something else that isn't best for them, but they have their biases and their whatever old-fashioned whatever beliefs, erroneous beliefs, and you got to for their own good, remove them from that belief and then put them on the path that is effective based on all the research you've done?
So absolutely, George. That type of friction was very common in my roles.
Okay.
And it all depends, right? Like in certain roles, that was welcome. So if suppose you and I disagree on something, but I stuck to my guns and said, no, my research doesn't point out to the direction that you want to take, George. Well, there's a simple, either I was the analyst and my what my beliefs went on paper and got published. Now you can challenge those, but I always refused to surrender my editorial control. I think that was, you be you, right? You do you.
Right.
So if I lost my job because of that, I figured I'll just lose my job because I'm not going to lose my professional integrity, so that my superior would feel just a certain level of comfort. Now, it usually doesn't appear that way. Usually it would appear like, oh, why don't you work the entire weekend and see how wrong you are?
Oh, man.
And then, I would pretend to work the whole weekend and say, no, nothing new. My research still points to that, right? And certain times it didn't, in many ways, one of the biggest successes was I was really at odds with someone who controlled my career for 2 weeks. And I really thought, this is it. This is the end of my career here at the firm. And then lucky break, things just that were announced that just proved me right, right? Because usually what happens is, say there was one company in particular, I won't name it, but we were very down on it. And it's 20 years later and the company's not doing very well, but that's how long it can take. It can take 20 years for your fact to be proven correct, right? It's like when you watch TV shows, at the end of the episode, the hero is proven right. Sherlock Holmes was so right and everyone else was so wrong. And it's a seminal moment. Everyone knows it. But that doesn't work in real life as easily as that. You got to stick to your guns. The share price could go in the opposite direction, and it might take years for you to be proven right. Now, it takes two things to be successful. A, you have to have the strength of your convictions, but B, more importantly, you have to be correct. Yeah. Now, I've been in situations as well, George, where I stuck to my guns and I was like, no, and then I was proven wrong. Those are the times where you get, that I just got punched in the stomach type of feelings and I feel like throwing up. Because A, you really rubbed everyone wrong, and B, you kind of look like an idiot at the end of it. Although professionally, I followed the same processes all along. So you got to watch out for that.
Wow. Yeah.
It teaches you humility.
Yeah.
So that's good. Now, and to my credit, I think I've been far more right than I have been wrong. But if you want to challenge me, go right ahead. But I want to see it in, mathematical form. Show me things that would demonstrate a different paradigm. Show me something that's disrupting my conviction. Don't just say you're wrong.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that would lead me nicely into the final exchange here, and basically it speaks to that because I was wondering what some of the biggest challenges you faced are, what challenges you still see that are very persistent in your field, about like it could have been the emotional attachment, or about the arguments, whether the arguments are at least held in a constructive bubble, or they're more disruptive and combative. Um, the challenges of analyzing correctly, or the challenges of transmitting training about this effectively to peers, or to report readers, stakeholders at the end. Amongst all that, what do you think would be your biggest, or is your biggest challenge going forward? That if you could wave that proverbial magic wand, you'd like to have that settled, because it causes a lot of grief, and and resolving would cause a lot of joy.
Well, yeah, it's a long list of challenges in my industry. I think the biggest challenge is the challenge of performance. We're not just doing this for kicks or for pretending that we're very smart. We actually have to perform and do well in the stock market. Now, I mentioned a few things. I'm invested in a few stocks that I'm very high on that have collapsed on me, especially nowadays with COVID-19. None of the fundamentals, like this is kind of the core of what I do. I look at the fundamentals. I look at the actual revenues, for instance, and the sales and the amount of cash flow. Not that might have dropped maybe 5-10%, whereas the share price has dropped 90%. And so that's a huge challenge because there's a huge disconnect. So if I'm talking to a client, the client's going to be like, well, how come this has collapsed on me? This is my net worth. This is all the money I've saved. And I have to demonstrate, well, the fundamentals don't point to a massive share price decrease. It could just be the sentiment of the day. And the same thing on the flip side, if a company's flying high and I'm not invested in it, I have to ask myself, well, am I the one who's wrong? Even though all the fundamentals don't point out to the share price performance. And at the end of the day, I mean, if all you can do is take your money and put it, say, in a GIC and make about the same amount of money as I do invest in a stock market, well, that's a failure for me, right? Because I'm taking higher levels of risk. The whole component of higher the risk, higher the return is an obligation. It's not an automatic, meaning if I take the higher risk, I must get the higher return. And that means that my performance must be correct. Most of the performance that in the industry is measured on an annual basis. Oh, we returned 10% that year. Like imagine if you finished 2020 with a 5% return, you might think, well, that's not very good because the stock market averages between 10 and 15. But given the year that we've just had, you might start off the year, we start off pretty hot, like with a 10% return, and then it crashed like almost 50%, and then it soared back up. So in my portfolio, I don't measure it on an annual basis. I measure it on a total return basis. But it's all a question of, am I making the money I'm supposed to be making? Am I getting the performance? Because at the end of the day, what we do shouldn't be just a mindless adoration, but an actual value creation exercise.
Very good. So, and how long would you, like you mentioned with the fact that things crashed and then rebounded, like how much patience would there be for the value to reassert itself? And yeah, when you make a mistake, it's like, yeah, okay, do you say, okay, yeah, it stings, but don't worry, it'll come back? Or when is that cutoff date that you say, yeah, cut my losses, or no, don't worry, I have the faith that it's going to rebound, I guess. All that becomes a feedback loop in the long run, I imagine, from past experiences, knowing when to, know when to hold them and know when to fold them, as the song goes, right?
That's a very good question, George, because, as I went from just an armchair investor to what maybe I am a professional now. Well, like, for instance, I had to learn to sell a company at a loss. So if you apply the strict analysis and you calculate and you adhere to an investment process like a Shaolin monk, if you will, well, what happens if the share price collapses 90% on you, and then finally the fundamentals turn and justify that share price collapse? Well, if I'm supposed to apply my discipline I'm supposed to sell at that point. That's a huge emotional, disgusting feeling. But if I'm a professional and the fundamentals have turned, even though I've lost 90 cents on the dollar, I must sell. And that was a huge you have to learn how to do that, because as you can tell, that's not just a math decision. That's kind of an emotional pride swallowing decision as well. It's better to get 10 cents on the dollar than 0 cents on the dollar, George. It's a hard lesson to learn, but the people who've learned that, and then I didn't have to do that very often in my life. But that's just it. Like, I don't want to run by my emotions. Coming back to the whole players, you have to trust your draft board. If a player is slipping on you and every team's passing on it, you might think, well, what's wrong with this one player? But he was very high on your draft board and you're up next to select, you draft that player.
You beat me to the punch, Phil. I was just gonna go back to that, and I was thinking, like, as silly as it may sound, but actually became relevant to the conversation when we traded PK Subban out of here. It was like, oh, outrage, and how could you? Even I was upset too. But now in the long run, PK is not quite the superstar he was, and Shea Weber's looking still pretty strong despite his advanced age. So it's like, what I would recommend, I guess, almost if there were any panicky stakeholders, upset stakeholders, and so forth, what we would do from an instructional standpoint is say, we stand by these, 10 principles, and you have like some sort of infographic, and based on this, you can make it an algorithm or pillars or whatever, and even have little graphs. Yeah, okay, it looks like we should bail on this, but based on these principles and based on past performance, and have little graphs, we're going to hold strong. So measures to, turning the abstract into fact, to use it as like an emotional band-aid to people that may otherwise, take a wrong decision because of emotions. So I don't know how much of that is done already. I mean, I do see like reports for mutual funds and whatnot that say long-term and whatever, but that'd be good to uphold in reports more often if the situation calls for it, because it's such a emotional issue.
Right, and it's not just drafting players that no one wants. It's also letting go of players that are just not performing, even though you spend so much on them. Like, you draft them very highly, and they're not delivering, and it's year 3, and they're just not improving, and it's just knowing when to cut your losses, as you said.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, from my end, I was going to ask, how in your field you take advantage of emotional engagement, because sometimes we have to take what may appear a bland topic and make it interesting and fascinating and so forth. And it's, from what I'm hearing, a lot of it in your field is very emotion based, and sometimes it could work for you and sometimes it could work against you, and you just have to present things in a clear enough manner, backed by past performance, backed by graphs and solid math, to say, no, this is what you should be doing, trust us. So that's what I'm getting out of it from my end, is to see what I can do as a way to make my case, and when we recommend things, when we teach things in my field.
Well, I mean, I'd never say to someone, just trust us. That would be, here's my storyline.
Yeah.
Here's what I think's going to happen. Let's circle back in a month and see, how you thought things went and how it tracked well or not to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And hopefully I earn your trust by proper prognostication, and you recognize it, right? But yeah, use of stories. I mean, I can walk you through a couple of business stories. I won't, because it'll take time. But these stories can really clarify things. Now, but if the story is wrong, if I tell you something's going to happen in the next 2 months and it doesn't happen, I better have a very good explanation for that.
Yeah.
And, we're not flying off the seat of our pants here. We're trying to use a lot of data and come up with a performance. We want to perform, and we want our customers to be successful from a monetary value standpoint, not from a feel-good standpoint. Of course, that's kind of one of my weaknesses, where I can be too detached, right? And I'm not reading people's emotions. That's not my strength. but when it works, I can explain it, and that's very important to me.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So yeah, in the end, that was the whole theme of this. We're pretty much alike. Sometimes you have to leverage emotions, take advantage of them, or sometimes you have to soothe them if they're not working in your way, backing it up with, okay, yeah, not just trust us. Indeed, well, I think I meant to say trust us because we have all this stuff to all this proof to validate our direction, and here it is, and the graph's going up and down and so forth. But it's this dance between almost the linearity or the logic of what we used to do in engineering and like the human emotion, and all that to lead to a common goal of yes, profit and performance and happiness at the same time, which we assume will come there afterwards. So, all right. So Phil, that is just about it. I'm done with the questions. I think we had a wonderful hour together. So I will wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining me. This was great. This was a challenge because you accepted this like yesterday while I was still scrounging for people.
Well, I was actually looking to launch my own podcast career, so I should be thanking you, George, because this is like an initiation to it all. And thanks for inviting me over. I appreciate it.
All right, perfect. And if you ever need a guest, you know who to call.
It will do, George.
So that's about it, folks. Thank you so much for watching. As I go along, I'm picking up things that I should be doing. And what I didn't do last time that I should be doing is the usual YouTube shtick of asking you to, if you enjoyed this, of course, to press the like, to press the subscribe to keep the momentum rising, the stock of this podcast rising, and leave comments as well. Feedback, ideas for future episodes. If you even want to appear on an episode, like the thing is, I interview anyone and everyone because we all have something in common. And all that said, we are done for this one. Thank you very much. Thanks once again, Phil, and take care.